Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are back with another Neurodiversity Stories. My name is Darren Clark and I'm a neurodiversity consultant, coach and marketeer. Now, we have another absolutely phenomenal guest, a great friend of mine, Lisa Kerr, who is an incredible ADHD coach. And I honestly cannot wait to welcome, there we go, get my words out, cannot wait to welcome her to Neurodiversity Stories so she can tell us a little bit about her story. Also, we're going to be talking on subjects around masking, which I know is something massive, speaking to the neurodiverse community, that this is something that's very, very big in our own personal lives and obviously workplace as well. And I also want a massive welcome, going to get these words out today, a massive welcome to our brand new sponsors, NATTC, who are an absolutely incredible organization. I will be sharing the details of what they do and how you can get in contact with them going forward. So most importantly as well, we couldn't do this show without your comments and your interaction. So thank you so much for the people that watch this live on replay, and then they watch it over on YouTube, and different social media channels are available. So I want to say a massive thank you to NATTC, who are our latest sponsors. I want to just share with you a little bit about what they do, and then I will tell you how you can get in touch with them. So guys, that's NATTC. They are passionate about empowering organizations to reimagine how they support neurodiverse or physically disabled staff. By working with the private and public sector employees of all sizes, they provide you with a complete end-to-end service, whether it's conducting workplace needs assessments, guiding you through the access work process, or raising awareness through coaching. They'll show you how you can operate at your very best. Please do. Access to work is something that's become a massive thing. It's still quite an unknown thing, especially within the UK. So please do reach out to them if you have any questions or queries or would like some support. So, guys, I would like to, if you are tuning into live, let us know where you're tuning in from. We are hitting lots of different countries. I'm getting lots of messages throughout the week of people that want to, that are enjoying the show, especially enjoying the guests that are on this as well. But most importantly, I want to introduce our incredible guest next. And Lisa, I can see Lisa in the green room smiling, which is a good thing. So one of the things that I ask our guests to do when they are coming on the show is to send us a little bit of a bio. And I've been following Lisa's work for quite some time. We've been connected on LinkedIn for a while now, and I'm always impressed with her, the stuff that she's doing in the neurodiverse world and the stuff that she's done and the challenges that she's faced. So I'm going to give you a real snippet of a bio for Lisa, and then I will ask her then to maybe say the proper introduction. So Lisa is a qualified and chartered accountant, as a member of the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment with the Big Four global professional services firms. She's completed further qualifications. This is what I love about, I don't know if it's a neurodiverse thing, but we seem to love to learn and love to train as well. It was only in 2016 when her son was diagnosed that Lisa realized ADHD could explain both her own struggles and her strengths. She was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 40, if that's okay to say that, and then at the age of 45 she was diagnosed with autistic also. Lisa has spent the past 3 years studying neurodiversity extensively, and necessary for the battle to get her son an EHCP and a place at the special school, and her explanation of her own neurodiverse brain. Lisa, I was absolutely taken back by the work that you've done. I can't wait to bring you onto the show. So please, let's all welcome Lisa. Good morning, Lisa. Welcome to Neurodiversity Stories. How are you this morning?
Hi, Darren. I'm really well, thank you. Really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome, Lisa. I've give a real kind of snippet of your intro, your blurb. Could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and the work that you do as well?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. So, as you say, we as neurodivergent folk just love to learn, love to move around, and I have had lots of different aspects to my career. But as you mentioned, I started by training 25 years ago now with Deloitte, so Big Four global professional services firm. Started in audit, moved into corporate finance. I then moved to BDO, so another massive global professional services firm. And since then, I've had roles in industry, I've had roles in smaller businesses, and then I set up my own consulting firm 3.5 years ago. And this year, I've added to that by training as a certified ADHD life coach as well.
Wow. So is it right to say, Lisa, that you've been very busy?
Yeah, just a bit. Yeah, I like being busy. I've got ADHD.
So where do you think that you're at? Thank you for sharing that, by the way, and it's humbling to have you on. Take some time out to speak with us. Where do you find? Where do you think that love of learning has come from? If it is a love of learning, I'm only surmising because you do it so much. Is it a love of learning?
Well, it's an interesting question. So it is a love of learning, and certainly one of my kind of strengths when you do all those strengths profiles and things is that love of learning. I love to understand how things work. I'm kind of partly ADHD and partly autistic as well, special interests of kind of when I get something, I'm like, I really, really want to know how that works. But also across my career, people would say, why do you keep doing all these qualifications? When are you going to stop? Why do you keep doing something different? But I realized that actually it kind of all made sense to me, but I didn't fit that together until afterwards of realizing that because I've ultimately ended up as a business consultant, it's almost like I was on this journey to where I needed to be without really realizing why. And the qualifications cover all the different aspects of business. So I kind of sort of picked them up along the way and reflected afterwards, which I think is very often the case, isn't it? Of why was I driven to do those things? And you go, makes sense now.
You must find it really rewarding. Again, obviously the work that you do with your clients. What made you go from, if you don't mind me asking, what made you go from working in that sector and then going off and doing your own venture?
I moved kind of to smaller and smaller companies, and because I liked to be able to look across the whole business, that's the thing that fascinates me, is kind of looking at all the things that bring a business together. And primarily you realize that it's always the people, and spending time in HR as well as finance, it's all about people, and that if people are happy and if people are kind of content and if the environment supports them, then the business will thrive. And because of that kind of love, people would start saying to me, do you know what would be great to have someone like you in our business, so kind of own and manage business. I'm not kind of the number one. I'm not the front face of a business. I'm like the number two and the person behind the scenes who just gets the stuff done, because it's not my natural place to be kind of forward facing. And so people said to me, you could be doing this, you could be consulting and doing this for lots of businesses. And that gave me the confidence to think, oh, well, they seem to believe in me, so let's give that a go, and we'll see how that goes.
And it's fascinating, and I guess from having that experience in kind of working for huge, the companies you've mentioned are global organizations. This isn't just a small business that's set up; these are global institutes. And I guess we've noticed. I noticed from working in big organizations in the retail sector, 8, 9, 10, 12 years ago, what someone with dyslexia or ADHD was like for that environment. And I'm not saying that everything's completely changed and it's all everything's sorted. But what would you say that there has been a significant change or a bit of a change within these bigger organizations, or do you feel that there's still lots more that needs to be done, and you can see it more from working on both sides, from the smaller businesses to the large?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting question, and I think the big businesses are certainly really starting to embrace neurodiversity. We're connected on LinkedIn, but we're also connected with lots of other people in the same space, and so we do see all the time that we are getting those invitations to go in and work with the big corporates, and smaller businesses as well. But big corporates really are taking this very seriously. But the thing I kind of reflected on is, I didn't know that I was neurodivergent when I was in those professional services firms. And so when we say, have they got better at supporting people? It wasn't that they could have supported me better back then, because I didn't know, so I couldn't ask for the support. But actually the environment, the nature of those roles, and kind of talking about accounting, corporate finance, law, the nature of the roles and the way that kind of the structure is, the structure of the organization, but also the structure of the work, is actually naturally quite supportive for neurodiversity. Because if you think about kind of ADHD and autism, I like to be doing things that change all the time. That's the ADHD. I love to learn about new businesses, but also I like that control. I like to know what's happening and when. And if you put that into kind of corporate finance background, I was doing projects. So I had that constant something new, something exciting. We'll go into a new business. We're going to find out all this stuff about it. Super exciting. Off we go. You can be working all around the world. But you've got that structure behind it of, you've always kind of got that base. You've got your team. You've got all those systems in place. You've got support. So we always had a personal assistant, not one each, but for the team. So there was always someone there giving you that support. And at the time, I didn't really understand or appreciate that side of it. And now I look back and I think, I'm almost not surprised that I didn't realize the areas that I was really struggling in, because the professional area actually worked really well for me. So those things going on inside, the imposter syndrome, the RSD, the trying to prove you're okay, prove you're good enough, you just don't really clock that that's a thing, and that everyone else isn't feeling like that as well, because the environment actually is really quite suited to it.
Yeah, and I guess it's because it's that phrase, isn't it? That's it's always been done that way, or that's how we do it. It's always been done that way, and I guess a lot of organizations, although they're, if we looked at whether you're selling a service or a product or anything else, there's still a process. It still does seem, from a business point of view, there's a certain, we need accountants, we need marketing, we need sales, we need all of these, the operational side of it. So it does seem that there is this process. But the most important thing, as you mentioned from the early onset, was it's about people. And I guess what we're having, what this evolution of thinking, actually you're not just a number, you're not just a member of staff, you have feelings, and how can we work in tangent together? You have to really kind of be thinking about the environment that someone's working in, how to get the best out of them. And I've noticed, if I looked back on my corporate career, like 15 years ago, I would be thinking some of the things that I was doing that I was really struggling with could have been eradicated and changed. Not really simply like overnight, but something could have changed had there been a bit more support. But because that was the way that they were doing, and the budgets were just put into that, how do you think organizations can start to make small incremental changes to their organization to then, take it to the next stage? Because we know this isn't an overnight thing.
Yeah, I think I kind of want to stress that when I was in those organizations, they actually were really great at staff development. And that's kind of that's the thing where you think, and that's why I said, it's about masking and unmasking in professional services, is I was effectively masking it from myself as well, because I hadn't realized, but from the organization. Whereas the support that was in place back then you know, and still is in place, I guess, but they were really good at looking after people, and they were really good at having those things in place.
Yeah.
But if the people don't know what they need to ask for, the organization doesn't know what support it needs to provide. And I think that's where we've had a real positive movement, is actually because now there is so much more understanding, so much more aware of it, that organizations and employees, both sides, can kind of come together and talk about what are those needs, what are those support things. And because I don't see it as kind of organizations suddenly, certainly not the big organizations, suddenly having to find a budget where there wasn't one before. They've always had budgets for staff development. You know, they always have. It's just helping them understand what the right places are to put those budgets so that we can all work together on it.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes the word budget, when they look at things, I think it's down to prioritizing, and it's how much, I feel sometimes it's how much are they dedicated to make these differences and changes. So I'm not saying this in all organizations, but some of the organizations. And you know, I work, and you work with some incredible organizations, and you continue to do this. I've worked, again, similar to great organizations, but it's very interesting that, so I will get messages from, you know, some really great people, and then some of the messages will come through, and the first thing they'll say is, can we utilize your services, or can you come and speak? And then they end it with, but the budget's really tight, or this budget's really small, or we don't have much budget for this. And I wish sometimes that they would just leave that off and just continue with the message, so then you can continue the conversation. But I don't know if that's the same on most things. But have you noticed that sometimes within this sector that they mention sometimes that the budget's very tight, and I know businesses have to work to a certain budget. I get it, but it does seem it's like, should we invest this, or should we invest this?
Yeah, and great that you reframed it at the end there, because that's exactly the way to approach it. Is so yes, certainly, you know, some of the work that I'm doing now when I'm talking to organizations about going in to talk about neurodiversity, and they will initially talk about our DEI budget is this, or we're just starting to get working in this space. So, you know, there's a budget for the DEI committee, and, you know, working within that. But I guess the kind of advantage I have is that, having worked in finance and HR, that concept of how you actually put together, this isn't about a DEI budget. This is about an investment in people. And it's not about, can you afford to invest in it? It's, you can't afford not to.
Perfect.
Because when you look at the cost, the inherent cost of staff who are not supported, the cost of sickness, you know, the cost of recruiting. If you can't retain your staff because they're not supported, then you've got recruitment costs, but also there's a real big cost of kind of the onboarding of that unproductivity while that's happening. So it shouldn't be looked at as kind of, oh, have we got a budget for a speaker to come and entertain the staff today? It's what is our investment in our employees? And actually, I've actually been quite pleasantly surprised that the conversations I'm having right now are far more on that kind of tack. It's people saying, actually, we're really, really genuinely serious. It's not feeling like the box ticking exercise that we were probably concerned about maybe a year ago. I think now it really is, organizations are really going, do you know what, this is a good thing to be doing, and how can we properly support our staff and do it with the right intention?
Absolutely, and I think it's, you know, we're in an incredible month of October. There's so much awareness since you're sporting the color red, which is incredible. So there's lots of awareness, and, you know, I absolutely love this time. And then there's a part of me that it brings me so much joy to see these things, and then it saddens me a little bit when we come to the 1st of November that organizations go, okay, what's the next thing? Let's move on to the next thing, because we think about this 365 days of the year. But it's really interesting. And I think when we mentioned back to whether they have a budget for it or whether they don't, or whether, I think it maybe comes down to the lack of education, and I use that word loosely, knowledge, let's use the word knowledge around the subject, to think, because if it was, you know, I think most businesses would think, well, how does this improve our bottom line? How do we get this? How do we get this growth? And is this? And you go, well, actually, if we bring someone in to talk about this, how's that going to help?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying all businesses think like that, but there has to be a certain element of costings behind it. But it's really interesting to see how we can move forward with the organization, because if an organization, say now, so we're looking at October, and there is an abundance of people out there doing school talks and workplace talks and webinars and incredible stuff. But if an organization starts that and opens the Pandora box, so to speak, of having an individual in that workplace listen to that webinar or listen to that talk and then have nowhere to go to be able to then go to the next step, it's sad that time's been taken to do this, and then the person's emotional well-being has to stop from that side of it. Would you agree on that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Certainly yes, and it's something that I certainly ask, and I know you had Hester on a few weeks ago. In fact, first guest, wasn't she? And she said the same as well, that actually when you go and talk at an organization, if they kind of ask if you will come in and talk, the thing that the thing that I will always say is, absolutely, but what support is in place for your staff, because it is inevitable, particularly as a woman, because presentation is different. We know that women mask it more. We know that there's less awareness of kind of those traits. So when I speak and when I'm giving that kind of personal experience, and particularly, as I say, with the background I have, that almost helps you to hide it better. So often in the chat, you've got people chatting in general, but then you've got people who suddenly go, oh my God, this is me. And you think, yeah, that is going to happen, because that's kind of how it happened to me. And so I will always say, what support do you have in place? And I want you to mention that at the start of the talk. You need to tell the staff that if something comes up in this talk, that they need some support on where do they go and how are you going to support that, because otherwise I'm not going to come and do the talk, because people's mental well-being, emotional well-being is at stake if you suddenly open them up to something they just might not have thought of, and then just go, well, see ya, thanks.
I'd show, you don't want to see something. I've got goose pimples, and the reason, literally goose pimples all over, purely for the fact that and this is the difference, isn't it? When we talk about let's bring in a speaker to entertain our staff, using that phrase, loosely as we said, but the sheer dedication and the forward thinking that you have of thinking, yes, I can put my name, my reputation, and my and help, but ultimately, I want to know about the well-being of the staff that I'm going to be speaking to. Because if I go in and you say, you pay me, come in, I'll do whatever I need to do, and then just go, that's not how I work. And that, Lisa, is so commendable to be honestly to be thinking that. I'm not saying that other people do that. I'm not saying that, but from an organizational point of view, we have to think, okay, so if we start with a speaker, then we get a consultant, then we get this. That's the long-term longevity, and we're talking years. It could be years to be able to get to that stage. And I think that's where the education comes around to an organization to think, if you're gonna invest in this, you need to invest. But I just wanted to mention that, Lisa, because it really is a really commendable thing.
Thank you. And I have also noticed in those conversations that there do seem to be more and more organizations who have kind of the support in place, who have got kind of the networks going, the neurodiversity communities, and also who are starting to put in place kind of banks of coaches. Yeah. So, and a few I've been speaking to have kind of said, oh, but we don't have a neurodiversity coach, so would you like to join the bank of external coaches, because we've got executive coaches and career coaches and all of those. But I think that in itself is fantastic, to just know that organizations are starting to really look at coaching as a positive thing. As I think, in the past, it used to be, if you said, oh, we're going to get you a coach, people would think almost, oh, I'm on performance management. It's the coaching thing of can you step up, or are you, doors that way? Yeah. Whereas now it just feels like the whole concept of that aspect of staff development and that aspect of supporting staff is really increasing in organizations. And that's been really amazing to hear that those things are already in place. And of course, delighted to be invited to join some of those, but it really shows that commitment to it, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And I think, organizations are, they are stepping up, admittedly, one at a time or two at a time instead of hundreds at a time. But I just want to share a comment from Martin. So Martin Griffin, he's a regular. Thank you, Martin. You're a regular viewer for this, and you always contribute. I want to just share your. You said in a recent survey, when 60% HR staff say they support staff, and 16% or ND say they are supported. Big difference. It's not a tick box exercise. I think with doing things like this, with the incredible work you're doing, the work that having, whether people think that the month helps or not, I think it does, because it starts bringing that awareness side of it. And I think organizations are, I feel there's been a change. It's definitely been a change since I've been in this sector sort of 9 years ago. But I do feel there's been a big shift in the past kind of 3 years. So if I was to take you back, Lisa, to your kind of journey around this and why your first diagnosis, is that okay to talk about, to share? Could you just kind of talk us through that? Because I know you mentioned about your son as well. It'd just be great to hear a little bit about that, if that's okay.
Yeah, certainly, and it's absolutely okay to ask. And actually, we're coming up to the anniversary of World Mental Health Day, aren't we? Which was when a year ago on World Mental Health Day, I posted on LinkedIn to say, this is me, to say, I'm now going to just talk openly about this, about my journey, because I wanted to be an advocate for myself, for all other neurodivergent people, but mainly for our son, he's coming up to 14 now. He is in a specialist school, which is absolutely amazing. But you think there's not that many years until he is going to enter the workforce. And knowing in hindsight how much I struggled through that, I want that to be a different experience for him when he enters the workforce. And so it's off the back of, people like Dan Harris, who's doing absolutely amazing things with the Neurodiversity and Business Network. It's all those people who are now stepping up and saying, this is me, this is my story. And that encourages other people to share that story. And so, yeah, doing ADHD thing there, digressing from your actual question, coming back to that, which was my diagnosis, wasn't it? So
it's all relevant. Honestly, it's all relevant. Yeah, it was just, again, around your diagnosis, but again, the feeling around it. And you shared that beautifully. Yeah. So please don't worry.
Yeah. So it was off the back of our son. So when he was in primary school, the teachers were saying, Adam's, doesn't sit still, if Adam can be a bit disruptive and all these things. And at the time at first we were like, no, he's just just a bundle of energy. And then you think, okay, no, it's a bit more than that. He's going to need a little bit of support, and we need to figure out what that is. But because he was only 6 when we started that diagnosis process, the autism tests are done with clinical psychologists, with occupational therapists. They're tests where you're not even in the room for most of the tests, and the tests that are done, it's not asking, are you autistic? And I know that sounds really, really silly, as if you'd ask that, but actually the ADHD test, pretty much do say that. The ADHD test is quite formulaic. It's an interview, it's questions about how you present, how you act in certain situations, where the autism test is very, very different. So because he was 6, he clearly couldn't answer all of those things for himself. And so I was the one who had to complete all of those forms. How does he act in this way? How does he act in this? When this, how does that happen? And speaking to his school and his teachers as well. And as so many people say, and particularly so many women my age, you're the one who's filling out those forms, and you suddenly go, oh, right, I guess he got that from me then. It's just, when you go through it, it's suddenly so blindingly obvious to you. And you just think, how did I not spot that? How did no one else spot that? But you think, why would I have? Because I didn't have a benchmark before. I didn't have a questionnaire of going, have you thought about this one lately? But because that was so obvious, and because we went through the diagnosis, and he was diagnosed autistic as well, and he's also dyspraxic. But I looked at him, and the way his mind works, his autistic logic, I could understand it from a logical perspective, but it was so different from how my mind works that I was convinced, well, I've got ADHD, that's that, but absolutely not autism. And it was only when our son kind of was 10, 11, started becoming kind of a young adult rather than a child, that my husband started recognizing that some of the ways he was presenting were quite similar to some of the ways I present. And so in 2020, he kind of said to me, and this was, remember it clearly, we were in the kitchen, and I could see that he'd positioned himself between me and the back door, almost as if he was literally waiting to make a speedy exit if I just did not take it so kindly. He literally was kind of like, I just kind of wondered, have you ever thought maybe you might be literally autistic as well? Hard hat on. And I think I was just ready at the time to hear it, because I said, truthfully, no, I haven't considered it, because I was so convinced I wasn't, having gone through all of that diagnosis with our son. And I said, but maybe I am. And so I went away and I started to research it, as you do when you actually are autistic and ADHD. You go, oh, let's suddenly look into this. And I say on my LinkedIn page, I got a book. It was like a novel by a lady in her 40s. It was, it was like her life story. So it was kind of a fiction book, but sort of autobiographical. And within a couple of pages of it, I was in tears, because I suddenly realized that that's not how everyone experiences the world. And it was tiny things like, so the whole thing she was explaining, which was kind of ticking every one of those boxes, was she was off on holiday with her husband, and she had to be, she had to know exactly what was happening. And when they got to the hotel, she had to go and explore and do this. She had to know where things were. And then she had to take the battery out of the clock because the clock was ticking. It drives her mad. And I thought back to my days in audit and corporate finance. So we lived in hotels, we were off at clients all the time, all around the country, all around the world. The number of times I've been in a hotel room trying to figure out where the clock is, where that ticking is, and how I can get the battery out of it, because I can't sleep with that. It's like water torture to me, a clock ticking. And it was literally those things. And then all those things she explained about that hotel were because I'd done that so many times. And again, coming back to that professional services, I had literally done it almost week in, week out for the first years of my career. And it was just suddenly like, oh, right. That is, well, not just me, that's all of us who are also autistic, but it was just so clear. And so I went and got my diagnosis for autism, and that date will stick in my mind forever, because it was the 23rd of March 2020, which was the day Boris announced the first lockdown. So quite a significant date. I literally made it back from Brighton, back from the psychologist, just in time to watch that announcement. So quite a lot to take in on that day.
Lisa, thank you so much for sharing that. We'll dive into that if that's okay. And you, firstly, how did that feel? Because obviously we know how the lockdown for everyone globally, it had a massive effect on so many, the global population in so many different ways. How did that feel then with your diagnosis, and then almost being locked down from the social aspect of every day of what you're doing? Did that enhance your feelings around that? I mean, what was the diagnosis like? And I guess, like you said, in a very tricky, being put in a very tricky situation with it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was hard, and it's kind of, people sort of say, "Oh, I got the diagnosis," and then you almost think, "Yes, I knew it, and now I know it, and now I've got the bit of paper." You know me, my love of learning and collecting certificates. I'm like, yeah, I've got ADHD and I've got autism. Let's go see if we can get a full house. So you have that roller coaster of emotions of almost like, yes, now I know what it is. Great. Because in your head you think, so that's that then, because then I'll just read the book on how to fix it. Job done. Move on. And then you come crashing back down when you realize that's not how it works, and that yes, you can totally get some more understanding, you can do the research, you can think about the support you need. But I think I'm certainly not alone in saying that when you come down from that euphoria, you then actually go into a kind of grief cycle, because then you have to unpack the fact that, particularly when you're diagnosed at my age, 40 years that didn't need to be that way. 45 by the time the autism one was added, and that's really, really hard. And that questioning of, why did no one notice? Why did I not notice? Why didn't I have the support? All those times, and again, quite common, all those times I was diagnosed with anxiety, put on antidepressants that made no difference. I was anxious, but I was anxious because I was unsupported neurodivergent. So it wasn't anti-anxiety medication I needed, it was ADHD medication. And you kind of go through that whole thing of what might life have been. And so you have to kind of work your way through that, and you have to almost come to, felt like almost a lower starting point than before the diagnosis, because you kind of go through that whole grief cycle before you can actually get to the place where it starts to sit comfortably, and then you start to move out the other side and onto the positives. And that was the point at the start of this year when I kind of took hold of it and said, I'm going to train as an ADHD life coach and support myself, support our son, and support all of those neurodivergent business people who I work with. So that's kind of my coming back out and back on the roller coaster on the way up now, having hit that bottom.
and truly inspiring, because that journey, like you said, with all the ups and downs, and the continuous battles, because like you said, we do have our good days, we do have our bad days within this side of it. But it's really interesting what you mentioned about, and it does come with the late diagnosis, because if I was 36 and you said you were 14, you almost have to undo the way that you were living in certain things and the triggers that were happening. And like you said, almost kind of start again with certain things. And are you a lot more kinder on yourself now, Lisa? Because I mentioned when you said, with the ticking clocks and all these different things and all the other bits and pieces, and you said, do you find, because I know you mentioned about what could have happened and what could have things. Are you a lot more kinder on yourself on these things, or do you still relive certain scenarios where you wish it would have been a little bit different?
I certainly relive things, and yes, I definitely try to be kinder to myself. I say try because I don't always succeed, because things like that kind of imposter syndrome, and I have massive rejection sensitive dysphoria, and that's something I've always really, really struggled with. So I'm now far more aware of it. So I try and kind of coach myself through those things. But yeah, I try to be kinder to myself. But what I've also done, taking the positives, is just realizing what my strengths are as well. So again, coming back to that kind of early career, and the kind of judgment you have, that when I came out on LinkedIn, when I outed myself on LinkedIn last year, one of the main comments I got from people, and this is people who have known me and who have worked with me extensively, and they came back and they said, but you can't have ADHD because you've got the most amazing attention to detail. And I said, yes, I do, because it's not about a deficit of attention. It's about a deficit of the ability to regulate your attention. So if I'm not focused on something, I am all over the place. But when I'm focused, I am really focused. And that actually combines for me with my autistic kind of spiky profile. But my autistic strengths, one of the key things for me is my analytical processing skills are off the scale. I'm on the 99.9th percentile. And when I put all those things together, the fact I had a career in corporate finance makes absolute sense. I was doing due diligence. We were working through the night. And if you needed the person who at 4 a.m. could still review a legal contract and spot things, who can look at figures and spot anomalies a mile off, who in a crisis, when everything goes out the window and the project needs revamping, all of those things are my absolute strength.
Wow.
And so being kind to yourself is understanding that yes, there are lots of things that could well have been easier, but also there are lots of things that were and that continue to be my absolute strengths, and that are because of neurodivergence. So, and I don't use the term superpowers because I think it's unhelpful, but it's recognizing that we do have both sides of those things. But that perception, that's where I'm trying to kind of help educate and make people more aware, because you say I've got ADHD and there's suddenly a judgment of like, oh, don't trust her with the detail. And you think, no, absolutely. I'm the best person. If you need detail, I mean, ask anyone who works with me. I am painful on the details. If a process doesn't make sense, if a system isn't efficient, if instructions just aren't clear, I can't have that. We've got to make it clear for everyone, because why make life difficult? So my absolute strength. But put me in a room networking, which I've done extensively, and whilst it looks like I'm super confident and people say, describe Lisa, confident, you think, no, dying inside, masking, confident, you network. And I love it. I love it at the time, and you do it while still thinking, oh my God, what if they all hate me? But I now know that in being kind to myself, I plan that if I'm networking, I then block out my calendar, because I realize I don't have the emotional energy after that. I just need to go into a quiet room and not have to speak to anyone.
And that brings me on to, thank you so much for sharing that. It's so interesting. That brings me on to my next thought was, how do you have any certain things that kind of help? I know you just mentioned, I block out the next day because, like you said, you're emotionally drained by taking on people's emotions and talks and those feelings. Do you kind of have any other kind of strategies that you work upon that you can kind of foresee, or actually, like the networking, if I network, then I can take the day off from those activities. So is there anything else that works for you, Lisa?
Yes, I definitely plan those things, and kind of planning in those downtimes, which I wouldn't have done before. Some of the kind of tools I use that I find really useful. So loop earplugs have been an absolute lifesaver for me. Not just kind of for commuting to take some of the noise away, but actually when you're at conferences. So there are different kind of styles of them, but one of them is kind of aimed so that you can still have conversations. And if you're in a really loud conference room, where you've got like 10 people around a table, but there's 500 people, and then there's the speakers and all the rest of it going, I just found that so hard to physically hear what anyone was saying because of all that background noise. But with the loop earplugs, that's just an absolute game changer. And similarly, if I'm trying to concentrate, I've recently come across, I think it's brain.fm, which is the app you can download that's got like the focus music. So I do quite often put my AirPods in, put the noise cancellation on to just block out the background, but use those real kind of focus music, the kind of binaural beats, the sort of repetitive tones. I can't listen to the radio or anything like that. That would totally distract me. So it has to be something that's that kind of background noise.
Yeah, I put a post out the other day, and you mentioned about the loop headphones, and that seemed to be because I always mention, I listen to classical music, not the actual words, the actual instruments, and that kind of helps and soothes me and brings me into, back into that into the environment, and that seemed to be, a lot of people's go-to on that side of it, which has been really interesting, and it's. I always remember trying to, with my dyslexia, I always remember whenever I was stressed or trying to get something done and having a laptop in front of me and desperately trying to respond to this email, which was only, a couple of paragraphs. And it would take me anything from 20 minutes to 50 odd minutes to respond. And I remember, the screen was moving, everything was just, and I was just so hell-bent on trying to get this done. And what I've learned now from, again, a few strategies from the headphones and stuff is when I get into these situations, I literally shut the laptop, go for a walk, or I just literally try and desensitize myself away from this. And when I come back, in the hope that it works. But I guess it's, if we were to take these environments where you and I are thinking about, we can block that day off, or we can wear headphones or something like this. I can imagine it's a little bit more difficult in organizations where you have a member of staff that has to have, say, headphones in throughout the entire day to be able to work in that office environment, because we have to have people speaking, you have to collaborate as a team in things like this. That's what they would say. Would you say that that's why it's even more important to try and is that some of the work that you do to try and understand that, or could you talk me through a little bit what your thoughts are on that, Lisa?
Yeah, certainly. So I worked in open plan offices for most of my career, and I found them really, really difficult. And I would always try to be sat in a corner. And it's still the same, whether it's offices, whether it's restaurants. You know, I like to be sat in a corner so that I'm protected from the noise, and also, excuse me, so that I'm protected from people walking behind me, because actually that is something that causes me massive anxiety. And when I would say I'd rather have a desk where people can't walk past me, people immediately think, oh, is she shopping on Amazon all day?
Oh.
And yeah, and it's so hard to go, it's not about anything I've got on my screen. It's about, it just makes me physically anxious, not knowing if someone's behind me. So I would actually be constantly looking to see if someone's coming up behind me rather than doing the work. And it's tiny things like that. You think that doesn't cost anything when you're doing a seating plan, to ask where people want to sit. And similarly, having done lots of that when I was in corporates and in HR and kind of looking at office reorganizations, whilst that's my preference, if you ask people in a team what they all want, you know, there are some people who will say, I want to be right in the middle of it because otherwise I'd be really anxious I was missing something. So there are some people who work best in the middle. And it's just having those conversations. And obviously there are constraints. You can only do what you can do. You can't, you know, everyone can't have the corner desk. If there's only so much you can do, but by at least bringing everyone into that conversation, it's not just about supporting the neurodivergent staff. It's about everyone has their own preference, and everyone can choose, or should be able to choose, whether they want to be in the thick of it or whether they want to sit somewhere that's a bit quieter, you know, where that's an option, or go into a meeting room to work. Or if someone is wearing those headphones, does that matter? As long as they're available when they need to be available. And you see some organizations kind of have the cards on the desk now that I really love, where you can kind of just put a little card on your desk, and it's almost like the red, amber, green of, you know, red is I'm really focused, please don't interrupt me. Yeah. And green would be, yeah, come and have a chat, you know. And the amber might be, well, I'm busy, but if you really need to, or, you know, just those little signs that say, actually, I've got my headphones on, but yes, you can come and talk to me. I'm just wearing them because it blocks out the noise in general. It's little things, and they really don't have to cost a lot.
No, and you're actually you're spot on, and as always, Lisa, and it's interesting, isn't it, when we talk about seating arrangements in an office, because we do this whenever you go into a restaurant or something, or a certain place, and they say, you know, where would you like to sit? And you have a preference outside of work. So why wouldn't you have a preference inside of work? And ultimately, you don't just go in a restaurant. You go in for, you know, hour tops if you've had, you know, drinks and a dessert. But in an office, you're in there, you know, for 7-8 hours, could be even longer. And that's a long time to be, you know, as you mentioned as well, looking over your shoulder, thinking, is someone going to walk by? I'm always amazed when you pass some of these in Bristol. There's this, I think it's Hargreaves Lansdowne, this big, huge, massive building, and it's just all glass fronted, and you can see, you know, hundreds of people all sat by the window, and you can see literally everything. We can't see on their screens, but you can see everything, and it's literally from what they have under their desk to their. And I've always thinking, I don't know if I could work in that kind of goldfish bowl environment. I'd be so panicking, and plus I'd just be distracted of looking at the traffic on path. But it is interesting, isn't it? That and I think these are the conversations that organizations should be aware of. But they're little conversations that have a massive impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe, you know, we've started having these conversations now, from obviously when we had the pandemic, and, you know, everyone was remote working, and now they're trying to get everyone back into the office. I think it was a real good time, you know, a poignant time to think about your office space and think about the people that are in it,
mm-hmm.
to be able to kind of ask them where they're going to be able to sit. So were you able to get that kind of support when you're speaking to other organizations for people? Has it come up from people where they would prefer to work, whether it was remotely, whether it was in the office, a certain space?
At the minute, I think people are kind of settling back into that what hybrid working really means, and it's gone from everyone working from home all of the time, as you say, to organizations trying to get people back into the office a bit more. So I think now is the time that we ought to be having these conversations. I'm not sure they're going on quite as much as they should be in that context of asking everyone. It feels a little bit like it's seen almost as like the them and the us, as in we're the kind of them of what do we need to do to support the neurodivergent people, whereas making it clear of no, have that conversation with everyone, because these adjustments just benefit everyone. It's not, I don't like when we talk about, you know, neurotypical, neurodivergent, what are we doing to support this marginalized community? Yes, everyone needs support, and it's really important that we do look at it from the right way. But if we just approach it of how can we support everyone in the best way, and some people will need more adjustments than others, but a lot of the adjustments will suit everyone, and people who equally just may never have thought about those things, because actually they're not struggling with neurodivergent conditions in the main. They might be doing just fine, but they just might never have thought until you ask someone, which part of this office do you prefer to sit in? Very many people have never really considered that question.
No, you're absolutely right. And I guess as the organization grows and then a desk becomes available, then that as a new starter, that becomes your desk, and people have their own particular, you know, place that they sit. But the impact, and it could be massive on the morale of your team and how you collaborate with other members of staff within this. So yeah, it's a poignant thought, and something that I thought about quite a lot around this. Lisa, how we're coming up to near our time. I told you it would fly by.
It really has.
Lisa, how can people get in contact with you, from the incredible work that you're doing? We will share all your links and everything else as well, but how tell us how people can get in contact with us and the incredible work you do.
Oh, thank you. So I'm on social media. LinkedIn is my main platform. So Lisa Kerr, or my corporate page on LinkedIn is adhdbrain.coach. And my website is www.adhdbrain.coach. So you can find me on any of those places. As you know, Darren, I try to be quite active on LinkedIn, so people can connect with me however they'd like to.
And we will put all the details and everything behind. But you are, I see, like I said, you are very active, and I think it was incredible. You'll never really know the impact that you had on people when you shared your story, and this is why I've always said, about like the pebble effect. The fact that you were brave enough to do that is really commendable, and the fact that people now would have been able to see this and then shared their story to their loved ones, their workplace, their friends. And I think that's the most truly giving thing that someone can do, is to be brave enough to give that. So I really do. I think that's wonderful that you did that.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind. You make me all emotional. Thank you.
Lisa, I can't thank you enough for your time. It's been absolutely amazing speaking to you. I will forever be a massive supporter of the work that you do. And thank you for supporting us here at the channel, Neurodiversity Stories.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Darren.
No problem. Take care, Lisa. Speak soon.
Bye.
So that's our another episode of Neurodiversity Stories. A massive thank you to our guest, Lisa. Another incredible guest, phenomenal story, and the work that she does is absolutely commendable. So please do follow her on LinkedIn and her adventures. And again, ultimately, get in contact with her if you are looking for any work to collaborate with her. Another massive thank you to our brand new sponsor, NATTC. The details of this will be all in the blurb. Please do check them out if you are looking in your workplace to be able to help about access to work, coaching and training as well. Massive thank you to the followers, and massive thank you if you watch this program live, or if you're watching it on replay, then do drop us a message. We'll be back next week with another Neurodiversity Stories. Take care, peeps. Speak soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.